Welcome back to my channel, and today we are reviewing Crawl. So Crawl was directed by Alexander Aja, and it stars Kaya Scodelario and Barry Pepper. During a Category 5 hurricane, a woman by the name of Haley finds herself and her father trapped within the crawl space of their home, along with a few hungry alligators lurking in the floodwaters. So Crawl was a film that I was expecting to be, really bad. It seemed like another variation of Sharknado. You know, those films where sharks in tornadoes, and this film seemed like it was like, oh, well, let's take that but make it alligators and hurricanes. And at first I honestly thought this was going to be like a direct-to-TV movie or direct-to-VOD at Walmart or something. And I'm pretty sure that's what everyone was expecting. The premise itself could make a very ridiculous movie. This film was not screened for critics. They didn't have press screenings for critics to go and see the film and then release reviews before its public release. It was released to everyone, critics and audiences alike, on the same day. And when that happened, reviews started to come out and people were really liking it. In fact, right now it sits at 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm being completely honest when I say that I was expecting this film to be horrible. And I gotta say, I was very pleasantly surprised. Crawl is the type of film that has a very simple premise, but it is very hard to execute that premise in a way that will give you the results you want, which is everyone to enjoy it and have a fun time. Thankfully though, this film is executed very well. This film is so much better than I was expecting it to be. It was so much better than it could have been. It was so much better than it should have been. This film does not deserve to be as good as it is, but it is. Who knew you could take a premise that, when spoken, sounds silly and turn it into a very thrilling, suspenseful, and surprisingly powerful creature feature? The two lead performances are surprisingly fantastic. They really carry this movie. It's their movie. They're really the only main characters in it. The only characters that you follow throughout the entirety of the film. In all of these harsh situations, I was constantly convinced that these people were actually scared for their lives. Kaya Scodelario plays the main character Haley, who, unlike many other films like this, is actually a professional athlete. She is a professional swimmer, which does come in handy later in the third act of the film. But there's actually a great emotional undercurrent throughout that backstory with her father and her mother, and that relationship, what happened with that. Her father constantly being there for her, but not being able to be there for her mother as a result. That is the main dramatic undertone that goes all the way throughout this movie, and the performances were amazing. They constantly sold it. Like, there was not a single moment where I didn't believe that they were actually feeling these deep and, to be honest, somewhat dark emotions. Another thing that I really liked about this movie, the character of Haley. It's no secret on this channel that I love films that have a strong female protagonist when that protagonist is not objectified. And thankfully here, she is not objectified one bit. There's a lot of films that think they're really cool simply because they have a strong, powerful female protagonist who has a voice, but then the director decides to objectify her and make her this sort of eye candy type character, and I hate it when films do things like that because it's kind of contradicting the main message you were trying to portray in the first place. But like I said, that is not the case with this movie. She constantly fights, she's constantly strong, she rarely ever gives up, which is something that actually boosted the dramatic heft for me. She was so determined to save her father. Rarely was she ever only focused on herself. She was only focused on saving her own life if she absolutely had to be. Like if she was the only one in a room or the only one in a situation. If there was someone else, she was constantly there to try to get them out of it before herself, which was really inspiring in a way. Like in certain scenes where you can tell she's not really worried about her injuries that she receives, which are quite a few. She's worried about saving her father. Despite everything that he's done, despite how many times he's wronged her and things like that, how many times he wronged her mother, her family, the entire structure of all of that, despite all of it, she is still 100% focused and fixed on getting his butt out of there. And that's actually a really good message in my opinion. On the topic of the hurricane, it was extremely convincing. I was constantly convinced that there was a hurricane going on. It always felt real. This does take place in southern Florida, where, you know, recently hurricanes have just been spiking down there. And the plausibility factor, like with alligators getting into their home, that is not far-fetched at all. There are tons of videos, news articles, news reports all the time about people in Florida Florida just filming an alligator walking through their kitchen. I mean, it happens, and it's kind of terrifying, honestly. So it was not hard for me to believe that alligators could get into their house. The CGI for the hurricane was extremely impressive. This film had a very low budget, and what they were able to do with it was, like I said, extremely convincing and very, very impressive. The alligators looked real enough throughout the entire thing. Again, I was convinced that there were alligators there. I was convinced there was a storm. I was convinced that these people were in danger. This film is also just self-aware enough to work. It knows exactly what it is. It is a just under 90-minute claustrophobic thriller that is meant to give you some scares, that is meant to keep you laser focused on the screen while it's playing. And that's what Crawl did for me. It's not trying to be anything bigger than it is. It knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to overstay its welcome. All it's trying to do is get you invested into the characters enough to ride with them through this thrilling journey, and it wants to give you some scares along the way. And it succeeded. This film is surprisingly powerful, especially towards the final act. Heck, I mean, the final shot. The final shot in this movie is powerful. I'm not gonna spoil it. It didn't make me tear up or anything, but it definitely hit me right there. Also, the visuals are stunning. Alexander Aja as a director, I haven't seen any of his previous films, but I'm extremely pumped to see what he has next for us. What I'm saying is there is definitely passion behind this camera. There is definitely a true visual artist behind this camera, and I really, really love that. It's not a perfect film though, obviously. There are some really dumb decisions in this movie that are not necessarily made by the main characters, which is another thing. There are some characters that are solely meant to be eaten. That's the only reason they're in this film, and it was obviously meant just to get that kill count higher. It didn't bother me too much, but I had a hard time believing that even characters that are solely meant to be killed would make that dumb of decisions. There's a scene in this movie where a looter sees his friend gets pulled underwater, sees blood in the water, sees an alligator tail thrashing around, and still continues to stand in the water in a Category 5 hurricane. Yeah, you're gonna die. It was just hard for me to believe that even people who don't necessarily have the best motives would be that stupid. There's also like a scene or two with the main characters where if they didn't make the decision they did, they probably would have gotten out of this situation much quicker. So it's not a huge negative, but I thought I'd mention it. This film also heavily relies on plausibility in a couple scenes, which seems to be a very common complaint about it. But here's the thing. People are saying that would never happen, and that's the key word. Never. It's not that it would never happen, it's just that it's not likely to happen, not the story. I completely believe that a hurricane would come through Florida, flood the house, flood the crawl space, and alligators would get in. I fully believe that that would happen. The parts that I'm talking about are, for example, no spoilers, towards the beginning where a character gets their leg bitten into and is thrashed around by an alligator and is banged on the walls, and then later, like literally a few seconds later, they are running on that exact same leg, and I was like, okay, you're lucky to still have that leg, but here's the thing. It probably wouldn't happen that way, but it is plausible. It is plausible that maybe the alligator didn't bite down hard enough to tear off the leg, and you do see that character trying to heal the wound, trying to, do the whole tourniquet thing, so it doesn't stray away from how painful it is. I just think the severeness of the wound should have been much higher. Also, there's a scene where a character has to set his own leg bone back in. That guy, first of all, would most likely not be able, in fact, probably would not be able to set his own bone back in without passing out. Also, probably wouldn't be able to have the knowledge and the skill to do it as well as he did. So that was another little distraction in the movie, but none of these things really took me out of it. I find myself really enjoying this film. I bought the Blu-ray the day after I watched it. I really liked it. Guys, in the end, Crawl was a thrilling and suspenseful film with great performances and a surprising amount of emotional power, and I feel extremely comfortable giving it an 8.6 out of 10, which brings us to a B+ on the grading scale. So Crawl, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever you thought, comment below and let me know what you thought. I'd be super curious to hear how many of you actually saw this film, because I do think this is gonna go down as one of the most overlooked films of 2019. And if you haven't seen it, what is your favorite closed-contained claustrophobic thriller? Thanks so much for watching, guys. It really does mean a lot. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.